Don Calypso asked me to actually look at the video by Dr. Jones. I like Dr. Jones, and I like Dr. Jones's research. And as a Padawan, he's one of my better Padawans. Let's put it that way. And I say Padawan is a term of endearment. It's not a term of derision. And my Padawan analysts are cute. And they remind me of me when I first started doing this. A lot of excitement, a lot of wild theories, and not quite on the money. But I know in time they'll get there. They're just starting out. I see the little think tanks forming, which I like. I see them throwing theories about, which I like. And as the Grand Master, it kind of like encourages me to actually sit back and chuckle. Yeah, because sometimes the enthusiasm it kind of outruns the predictions. Anyway, Don Calypso asked me to look at Dr. Jones's forecast. I'll link the video in the description. And he asked me what I thought of it. And I said it's cute. Cute, but wrong. Why is it wrong and misguided? Because one, to do this work, you have to be, as I call it, an amoral pragmatist. An amoral pragmatist. And as Craig Hewlett taught us almost 20 years ago, I remember him saying it, that you can't be a wingnut. What do I mean by a wingnut? You can't be a cheerleader for the right or the left. And far too often, I hear black men in this sector sometimes cheering for the wings or a side. And sometimes even in the black manosphere, I hear a lot of quote unquote conservatives turning into wingnuts, as Craig Hewlett puts it. And being a conservative or picking a side or a wingnut, as he puts it, skews you and makes your analysis wrong. Because as an analyst, you can't be on either side, because if you're on either side, that will skew your vision of the world. And you can't do that as an analyst. Now, if you're going to analyze and you're going to predict, you have to put your personal wants and your personal leanings aside. And you have to look at the bare naked truth. Now, Dr. Jones is looking at how the Supreme Court is actually going to pan out as far as right, left, or center. And the Supreme Court is an important piece, all things being equal. Congress is an important piece, all things being equal. The president is an important piece, all things being equal. They will determine how the pieces on the board are moved according to what the board is. But what a lot of analysts do not do, including Dr. Jones, is look at the board. The board is more important than the pieces or the player. Board first, pieces second, player last. The player, no matter who they are, and there are many, cannot move pieces that aren't there. They can't move on spaces on the board that aren't there. The geopolitical board is set by history, by circumstance, by environment. And then the pieces line up. What the other player has taken or put to his side or taken off your side of the board, and vice versa. No, it doesn't matter whether you're right or left. And I think I'm going to actually do a video on that later on about right, left as we see it. And then right, left as I see it, because I see right, left differently than most people see right or left. Most people think they're on the right and the left is so extreme, or the far right as they see it, or the far left as they see it. And their scope is very narrow about what right and left is. And they don't understand really what they're looking at, because when they talk about right and left and they think that the policies between right and left are that different, and they're really not. They may go about it differently in a slightly different way, and it might give advantages to certain people slightly than others. But ultimately, if you look at the policies going all the way back to 1932, right? Actually, even before 1932, they're fairly consistent from administration to administration. It moves very slowly, and it doesn't deviate that much. The policies against the former Soviet Union really has not deviated very much since 1917, when the Soviet Union actually came into being, and by that extension, Russia. It really hasn't deviated that much if you look at the historical policies. And you've had Democrats, Republicans, whatnots, right, left, or whatever you want to call them, for over 100 years. So right and left do not make that big of a difference. And to predict the defeat of the left for the next 40 years is nonsense. The left has not been defeated. The only thing that you see right now, as far as what you see with the Supreme Court and Donald Trump, is allowing the Republicans to hold the bag. That's all you see is Republicans holding the bag. They're holding the bag of excrement that they've been handed. Everybody knows that, including Donald Trump. He's playing the hand that's dealt him. And everything he's doing has already been preordained well before he even took office. Now, he might be making a public spectacle of himself by trying to play a bad hand. Basically, what he's doing is playing a bad hand badly. It's really what he's doing. And it's public. And he's trumpeting it like he's playing the bad hand skillfully, which he is not. Defeating China, and I'm going to get to that right now, because it's one of the things that tickled me. Defeating China over the short term is, the chances are slim and none. And I think slim is on the ropes. That's the short term. Defeating China in the short term is slim and none. Basically, defeating China over the long term is impossible. That boat has already sailed. Everybody knows it. Everybody's lining up because they already know the long-term future is China. China knew that back in the 90s. They have a long-term plan, because Dr. Jones should know this. Asians make long-term plans and long-term projections. China did not think that they are actually going to take over or be in this position that they're in now until 2040. And then it revised it 2035, 2025. Now it really is 2025. But it actually turned out to be 2017. Xi's already talking about how China and Russia are actually going to change global governance as we speak. The pieces of the board are already flipping as we speak. The momentum is not on the United States side, and U.S. isolationism will not save them. You being a global hegemon or global empire or the leader of a global empire, those days are gone, and isolationism will only basically accelerate that. Defeating China on the international realm is not going to work. That's already done. The only reason that the military was even talking about it and the corporations got their deal is to slow down the rate of decline. Nationalism will not save you from your fate. It's not going to happen. Can't. If you think about it, if you just think about what you're saying about the United States position in the world, if you think about what you're saying, isolationism is not going to be the answer if you want your former stature in the world. It's not going to happen. It can't happen. Not with nationalism or isolationism, is because the rest of the world will accelerate past you. You close off your borders, you get rid of NAFTA, guess what happens? Guess what China's going to move into? China's going to move in and occupy that space, which is why Donald Trump delayed the withdrawal NAFTA by the United States. It's a dumbass move. Forcing nationalism, corporate nationalism, as the right or the right-wing people think that they want or envision. One, if it does happen, if we carry it out to its natural conclusion, corporate nationalism is Nazism, it's fascism, but can only be done under an authoritarian culture. The United States does not have an authoritarian culture. It can happen in Germany. It can happen in Japan. It can happen in China. It can happen in Korea. Why? Because they have an authoritarian culture. You will more likely get that in Russia, in the former Soviet Union, or in Russia, Eastern Europe, than you will in the United States. The United States has a 400-year-old liberal culture, probably older than that, going back to the Magna Carta in the 1500s. You have a 400-year-old liberal culture. You can't change a culture within a matter of a few years. I don't care what you do to it. You're going to break it up before it changes, which they're already talking about. They're talking about a breakup of the United States. Now, I always say, be careful what you wish for. The thing is about Xers and young Xers and millennials. They believe that everything is going to be a smooth constant. In other words, you believe just because you didn't get a Category 5 storm in the last 120 years, that there's no such thing as a Category 5 storm until you get 5 in a row. We haven't had a Category 5 storm in Houston in 500 years, and it is not likely to happen. So you get one, but now you get 3 in a row. And you wonder, how can you have 3 once in 500 year storms in a row? Because the universe and nature always changes. And the calm that you see right now is Pax Americana over the last 80 years. You go back to World War II or pre-World War II, the world wasn't like that. The United States wasn't like that. Chaos and destruction was always at your doorstep, but for the last 80 years, it hasn't been, because you've had Pax Americana. Pax Americana is over with. You have a changing in the guard. And with a changing in the guard, you're going to have what? More perturbations, more turbulence, and more disruption. Now, the world has decided to mask that by charging up the credit card, paying out a lot of debt to keep all this turbulence or this perturbation undercover or down in a slow simmer. You put a lid on it. But if you're a boiling pot, what happens when you take the lid off? All of a sudden, things boil over. I can see you predicting 5 years out or 7 years out. You can do that. But with what's going on now with the lessening of Pax Americana, the changing of the guard, and we're not even talking about the singularity that's coming, the technological singularity that's coming. We're not even talking about that. So to predict 40 years out is impossible. It's not possible at this point. Nobody can predict 40, 50 years out. You can give a trend, but nobody on a personal scale can predict 40 years out. It's impossible to do. And a right or left government is not going to make a big difference one way or the other, especially the right or left liberal governments that we had in the United States. And trust and believe, it's not a conservative government. The United States is very liberal. And being center right or center left doesn't make very much difference. In fact, you're probably going to get more socialism in the next 40 years than you will get capitalism. What is capitalism? What is socialism? Means of production in the hands of what? The workers. Where are we headed with technology and the gig economy? The means of production in the hands of the workers, which is socialism. At its core, that's what socialism is. Not welfare. Welfare existed under the authoritarian governments. The most authoritarian government in the world has welfare. Highly capitalist countries like Germany and Japan that are highly capitalist have some form of welfare for themselves, that take care of their people, that make sure that people have jobs. It's an ordered society. The United States is a liberal country. It's not an ordered society. It's not an ordered culture. We resist ordered culture. Extremely liberal. I may have to do a separate video on liberal and conservative. But this is not to denigrate my Padawans. I see my little groups of analysts and geopolitical analysts actually forming and talking to each other, which is a good thing. I think there's about 3 of them, which I encourage. But I would caution them from a person that has been down their path and been in their shoes. Don't get too full of yourself. If you think there's going to be a rosy picture down the road, that means you're probably wrong. If you're too happy about a result, that probably means that you're wrong. Everything that I've predicted that have come true I've already knew that was coming 5-10 years ago, because that's the only thing that could come. There's only one way that the game could end. Donald Trump is not doing anything differently than any other president. So cheering for him and his policies, or you might as well cheer for the Golden State Warriors or the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is not a time to cheer. This is time to be critical, and hopefully hope that he makes the right steps, because there's plenty of landmines out there and he's stepped on a fair few already. Lastly, feminist public policy, which is the reason that everybody's so Twitter about Donald Trump. Feminist public policy. Feminist public policy is going the way of the dodo bird for 2 very distinct reasons. And has nothing to do with our voting in of Donald Trump or Republicans or anything else like that. Because trust and believe, Republicans were involved in voting in feminist public policy. It wasn't the Democrats. It was Richard Nixon and actually George Bush in the Congress actually put in what we think of as feminist public policy as we know it. Your no-fault divorce was put in by a Republican, actually started by a Republican, which is Ronald Reagan, who you love so much. Feminist public policy has nothing to do with right or left, or Republican or Democrat. 0. Your biggest proponents of making men should pay child support are conservatives, not liberals. The reason feminist public policy, such as welfare, food stamps, or whatever we think is feminist public policy, or is going to go the way of the dodo bird, is for 2 reasons. 1, the shit does not work. And they found that out over the last 50 years, shit don't work. And number 2, it's too expensive and there's no money for it. Has nothing to do with who's in office. Has nothing to do with who you vote for. Has nothing to do whether it's a Republican or Democrat. Your biggest shift in welfare, whether we like it or not, was under a Democrat, which was who we like to think of as a flaming liberal, and everybody knows that he wasn't, which is Bill Clinton in 1996. He cut the welfare rolls by 2/3. He cut welfare more than any other president. He shifted the cost of raising children or producing children, which is something that the government wants, which is the reason you have welfare in the first place. It's to actually pay for their future citizens or children. It's nothing to do with the women. And feminism was for the neoliberals, or what we call the anti-pro-socialists, to take power away from the men and give it to the women, so that, like Cerulli said, so that the Plutarchs could stay in power, tamp down the men. And the reason it's going away is because it doesn't work. And you have no money. If Donald Trump didn't do it, Hillary Clinton most assuredly probably would have. It just wouldn't have been as public, because you're out of money. And Donald Trump handing over the goodies to the corporations and to the military means there's less money. In fact, they're getting ready to hand over more money to the military and the corporations, which is the pseudo-fascist. The thing is, we're getting fascist light instead of getting Hitler. We're getting Il Duce, which we can kind of be thankful for that. And a lot of this is not his fault. It's something that he has to do. He had to make a choice. He made a choice. Now, the public, we the people, may not like it because you're going to have more homeless. You're going to have more people out of work. You're going to have a lot more people hungry. You're going to have a lot more people commit suicide and do drugs. It is what it is. You know, as a amoral pragmatist, that is just the way it is, whether I like it or not. This is what's coming. He made a choice. I told you he made a choice a year ago. He made a choice. I told you 2 years ago before he that he was going to get elected and that this stuff was coming because the Democrats wanted the Republicans to hold this bag, to hold this L. That's all you see. This stuff is standard. This is predictable. Looking at elections and looking at the courts means nothing. Those are the players. They're not the pieces, and they're definitely not the board. I've always been taught, regardless of who's in office, look at the policy. The policy is consistent from administration to administration, from person to person, from court to court. The policies are basically streamlined. They're basically in harmony. They're basically the same. It doesn't move. It doesn't shift that often. And when the environment changes, the policy will automatically shift, regardless of whether it's right or left. You look at TARP. The troubled assets stuff that's gone on from 2008 was not implemented by Democrats. It's implemented by who? Republicans, conservatives. All Obama did was continue and try to manage the pieces that he had, the cards that he had. Obama was already cutting SNAP cards. He was already cutting welfare. He was already cutting out Section 8. He's cutting it out already. It's already being done. Now, Trump may accelerate it, and he has, which is expected because he's Republican. They have the cachet to do it. Obama basically deported more immigrants in his 8 years than any other president in history. Now, DJ Trump may exceed that, but from what I've read and what I noticed and what I've read, DJ Trump and immigration is pretty much on par with the first couple of years of Obama. The only difference is that the press hates Trump. It's the only difference. They didn't report it on it when Obama did it, but they report on it when Trump does it. That's the only difference. There is no difference in how the pieces are moved around because you're basically hemmed in by the board and by the pieces that you have to play. You can't invent cards. I don't look at the player. I look at the board and I look at the cards. I look at the pieces that they have to play on. I look at the pieces that have to fit in the frame. And my Padawans will do well to stop looking at the players. Stop cheering for Trump. Stop cheering for Obama or stop cheering for whoever and look at the pieces that are in play. Now, with that, I'm going to jump off of here. This is for you, Don Calypso. This is my answer to your question. Please go to Dr. Jones's channel. I'm going to put the link in the description of the video. Please go check it out. See what you think. Form your own analysis. Start your own think tank. Get involved. Do some study. Do some research. The better informed the black men are, the better our community will be. This is BGS out, and I will see you guys on the next one.